Well, Greg, hi.
Michael, hello.
Thanks for coming today.
You bet. You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me over.
You are very welcome. Like I said, I've had many people I've interviewed who have added your name to the list as an important person to talk to, so I'm really grateful that you came. So let's get one little bookkeeping thing out of the way and have you state your name and date of birth and where you're born.
My name's Greg Driver. I was born in 1953, and it was over in the hospital near where my parents were living at the time in Visalia, California.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, I generally start these just by asking people when they moved to Jerome and where they came from and why they came. Can you elaborate on that for me?
It was June of 1975.
Okay.
The quick summary is when I was 2 years old, my parents moved to Puerto Rico, and that's where I grew up until I was almost 8.
Oh, no
Then we
kidding.
moved to the Washington, D.C. area and stayed there for 5 or 6 years. Then we moved to the Panama Canal Zone. I went to high school there.
Wow, do your parents work for the government or something?
Yes, my dad was a low-level bureaucrat working for USAID, and he was helping to secure loans for the government down there to get rid of the really awful slums and put in the barest minimum of 10 by 10 concrete slabs with running water and sewage systems in it to improve the quality of life for the people in that area. They would just raise all these, shacks that people were living in, and then, put streets and roads and sewers and water and,
Right.
the bare minimum of a 10 by 10 slab for them to start putting a roof over their head.
Oh, cool. Well, so you came in 75, and where did you come from at that point? You were how old?
21 probably still. And anyway, so we hopped back and forth from the DC area to, from Puerto Rico down to Panama and back to the DC area. And I went to school for a while there, and then I came out here because my sisters had gotten here before, and they said, you should probably come out here. And then I got a job with the Jerome Historical Society for a couple of years through the CETA program, which was the Comprehensive Employment and Training Act. And so the Historical Society got a grant from the CETA program to hire somebody to do some cleanup on their buildings. And so my job for minimum wage, mind you, but back then, I couldn't believe it. I was able to save $1,000 on minimum wage.
Because it was so inexpensive to live here.
Well, partially, yes, but a dollar was worth more back then than the inflated value and the devaluation of wages and et cetera.
Can I interrupt you? Did you get the job before you moved here?
No.
Okay, so you moved here and...
Scott Nesselrode was the administrator of the CETA program here in Jerome.
That's right, because he was involved with the Company Hill Homes.
Right,
Yeah.
And so I guess it might have been one of my sisters who badgered him, and he finally said, okay, let's try and get him this job. I don't remember the details, so I have to talk to my sisters about that sometime. But, so I got the job, and I cleaned out the, what is that, the Bartlett of a bunch of bricks that were down inside. And I moved them across the street, and that's the parking lot now.
Right.
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and thousands of pounds of bricks that were down inside.
From the building.
From the building itself. And then Bobby Bell was hired to put those metal caps on the top to keep the rain from coming in and causing the bricks to continue to fall down.
Okay.
So anyway, so I did that, and there was a flood on Company Hill that came down and filled up the back and then down through the bottom of the church up there that's now where the Historical Society is located. So I dug all that dirt out and yada, yada, yada. And I did a couple other things. I cleaned out underneath the spook hall. They just stored shit there for forever, and I had to go through and kind of organize and tell them, throw this away, whatever, you know. I mean, it was just a manual labor job, but it allowed me to put a toehold in this town.
Well, let me back up a little bit and ask you, was it something your sisters recommended about this place for you that you decided it was worth a
not
shot?
really.
Or you just didn't know what you were going to do and this popped up?
Something like that, yeah.
Huh. So they didn't think that you and Jerome would be a fit and tried to sell you the idea in that way?
No, it was just more like, you know, we were a close family since forever, and they just said, we're both here, so maybe...
Why don't you come?
Yeah, and see what happens.
Ah. No, so you're 21, this is 1975, so you're a young man. What are your interests in terms of what you wanted to do with your life at that point?
Didn't really matter.
You were a blank slate, ready to be
pretty
written
much.
upon?
And well, back then you've got so much confidence because you don't know any better.
Yeah, and your body's just supercharged.
Yeah, you know, and I would put a lot of physical energy out there, you know, and anyway, but I could, even though I kind of looked like a skinny guy, I did enough to keep them happy in the Historical Society.
Where did you live when you first got here?
Well, you don't remember Fern.
I've heard a lot about it.
Right, okay, well anyway, for the first, I don't know how long it was just at their little dollhouse, which no longer exists. Which was a tree house. It's literally.
Where was it?
Cool. Down back behind Gary Shapiro's house, which was Fern and Gary.
In the Gulch, yeah.
Yeah, and so I stayed there for, you know, just I don't even remember, and then floated around, but ended up in the Stickles Apartments, which is the Flavella Apartments, which is the Taylor Arms Apartments now.
I did the sign up there. Did you see it?
I see the sign. I didn't
with the arms up.
Yeah. No, I like the sign. I didn't know where it came from though. That's cool. Anyway, and so I was for a short period of time. I don't remember, a year or two, probably just a year. I collected the rents, including my own, for the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 apartments there. And I got $5 off of every rent, including my own, that I collected for them. So my rent was $45 a month.
Wow.
You know.
Therefore, the reason you could save so much money.
Yeah, a whole $1,000, you know, because I'm a cheap bastard. I know how to do it, you know. And that's good, you know.
When you got here, what'd you think of the town? How did it strike you?
Well, I think it struck me like it strikes anybody. What a cool little town stuck up on the side of the hill, you know. And it was unique. It had a healthy, alternate style, you know, the hippies. It had a good community of them. And so, you know, I easily made friends with a lot of those people at the time. And you just go from there.
Who were people you got to know pretty quick and became friends?
Well, Scott Nesselrode, you know, Michael the mechanic, that he's no longer around. I don't even know if he's still alive. I haven't seen him for 20, 30 years. Michael Shue was his name. Fern and Gary, you know, just barely. I knew Jane Moore and her husband at
Dave,
the time,
yeah.
Dave, and Richard Martin, because he was a friend of Nancy's up in the I don't even remember, the warehouse up there.
Right.
You know, he had a wood shop, and she had a little leather studio up there, and et cetera. And so, you know, if I remember more, I'll say more later. But then the old timers, some of whom were not particularly friendly, they couldn't rescue this town all by themselves. And so the hippies did do quite a bit to help rescue the town. You know, we had to put a lot of time into the fire department, which I had nothing to do with the fire department. I went to one meeting and decided it wasn't my cup of tea, but we needed warm bodies on the planning and zoning and design review. And that's where I put, you know, hundreds of hours into going to those incredibly boring meetings, but they're not necessarily. But meetings are...
But important.
But they were very important that we do that, and that we write up a town plan, you know.
So you were involved in that?
Not the writing of it too much. You know, other people were a little bit more capable than I was. But I did go to the meetings, and then after they got it rolling, I was on both those boards intermittently for decades.
Really?
And then I'm trying to figure out what order to kind of put this in. You know, and so I put my time in various capacities. I was on the town council for 2 consecutive terms. The first one was, you know, soon after I got elected, 9/11 happened. And that was one of the most frightening, depressing things that ever happened. I thought Jerome was kind of like dead, that the tourist traffic would just disappear, which it did, but, you know, only for a few weeks, a month or two, you know. And the town used to get dead during the winter time, because the winters were colder and much snowier back then. You know, if you stay in one place long enough, you can actually see that the weather changes dramatically. Yeah, but you know, to want to gamble that climate change is probably just a hoax is, I believe, a bad gamble that nobody should take. We should act as if it's the real thing, because you're going to be a pessimist at that point, and pessimists are the only ones who are never disappointed.
Can't argue with that.
Okay.
Well,
so anyway, so the town used to die during the winter time, and that was cool. You know, somehow we managed to survive. I don't know how we managed to do it, but we did. And everybody knew that they had to volunteer to make the town happen, and we knew we had to promote the town. And we tried to control it through its growth, through planning and zoning and design review. And it had a pretty strict sign. And for a while we had this horrible lady, God bless her soul, Ellen Smith, who was just like, she was the planning Nazi. And so she would go by the book and very strictly say, no, you can't do that. No, you can only have 2 signs. And no, you can't have any, you know, in the whole 9 yards. And we tried to keep it from getting out of control too quickly, because the way I put it is that we have become victims of our own success. It got away from us, and it's not as pleasant to live here as it was back then, you know, in the sense that it was quieter. You could drive up and find places to park. You didn't have to pay, you know, and these are all inevitable inevitabilities of becoming more successful. It's like, there's too many people, what do we do? Well, let's make money off parking off of them, for one, and I do hope that, you know, the majority of that money, the vast majority of that, goes into fixing the deferred maintenance on the whole town.
The infrastructure, sure. Yeah, me too.
Because there's a lot that needs to be done. Right now, it's the town crew, and it's the best that it's been for a long time. They're just going from one disaster to another. They're just fixing holes in the sewer line and the water line, and
I know.
on and
yeah,
on.
we
This
need.
is
We
very
actually
interesting.
need that money.
Yeah, we really do, and
Yeah.
it's approximately $10,000 plus per month. So I go, whatever.
Let's see some results.
Well, yeah.
Let's go back. Let's get up to that stuff, but let's go back to your early days here a little bit, if you wouldn't mind. So you had this job with the CETA. CETA, and so when that ended, what did you do?
I worked with Richard Martin for a while in his furniture making business.
Was that a new skill, something he taught you?
Oh, well, it's kind of easy. Here, cut this or hold this and I'll nail it together, or, sand this, whatever.
Right.
That's how you learn all that stuff. Then I went out to California for a year and helped my parents build their retirement house, Northern California. And then I came back and, right. Then I ran into Barbara Blackburn, who, her story is, do you know who she is at all?
No, I don't.
You don't know who Barbara Blackburn was?
Nope.
Do you know who John McNerney is?
I've heard his name.
Okay, do you know what Jerome Instrument Company is?
Yes, I do know that.
Okay, well, that's John McNerney.
Okay, I forgot, yes.
He invented a mercury detector, and I won't go into the science unless you want some other time. But at first, he just wanted to sell it to somebody. And somehow he heard through the grapevine that this lady, Barbara, who came to town, her name was Barbara Henley at the time. And there's a story about Guy Henley's wife, Barbara Henley. They were both in town at the same time, and somebody came looking for Barbara Blackburn and said, "Is Barbara Henley, where's she?" And they said, "Oh, she's over there." And he went over wherever it was. And, "You're not the person I'm looking for." But that's a funny coincidence that in a town this small, there were two people with the same name that could get confused with each other. Anyway, McNerney heard through the grapevine that she used to be vice president at Wells Fargo, which Barbara said she was just lucky to be in the affirmative action movement where they were trying to get women into, higher banking positions out there. But she was a vice president, and she's a very sharp lady. She was a very sharp lady. And so he wanted her to help value the idea of the company so that he could sell it. His little invention. And I think the story went that she says, "Oh, this is cool. You should actually keep control of it and make it up here in Jerome." And so I thought about it. He says, "Okay, but I need a business manager." And she says, "I don't want to have anything to do with it. But here's the name of a guy down in Phoenix." He went down and talked to this guy in Phoenix, and somehow the guy in Phoenix convinced him to come back and try and talk her into being the business manager for Jerome Instrument Corporation. And it was a lifesaver in this town because it brought a lot of money from not tourists, but from out there. And, dozens of people were able to get a skilled
A
job.
full-time job, yeah.
And be trained and develop skills and stuff like that.
And you were one of those?
No, not really, no. No, I met Barbara, and somehow we became a pair. And she needed a full-time person to work on those two houses. And so that's where that whole thing, that whole affair started. Was, we were good enough friends. She was a great person. She truly was. And anyway, so it's the Jerome Instrument story for the next 10 or 15 years at that point, until they got bought out by a bigger concern. that called itself Arizona Instrument, and they moved temporarily down to Clarkdale, which was a sad day, and then they moved the whole thing down to Phoenix, which is all fine and dandy. They're making, they invented some other things. Sulfur dioxide, is that what it is? Gas. Anyway, so they sold a lot of stuff to the Navy, because in submarines you have to know if mercury is building up in the air.
Yeah.
And the sulfur dioxide, I think I got that right, it's a poisonous gas that you have to monitor on oil platforms out in the Gulf and all over the world, because you can't smell it,
Right.
and it will kill you.
So he found a beautiful little business niche.
It was the beginning of an instrumentation, a scientific instrumentation. His idea was enough to be able to build off of, the idea that by vaporizing a sample, the mercury would go to the circuit and change the resistance in your detector, the film, the thin film, and that would change the little needle.
Yeah, right. And wasn't it was a geologic instrument to begin with?
Originally, yes, for
sensed
prospecting.
mercury-
If you can find mercury, most likely you will also find gold. And so originally it was that, but then it was for, certain environments that were contained, like submarines, et cetera.
Yeah.
And then it was for oil pumping platforms for these other things that didn't have to do with the mercury detector. But anyway, so that's that story. And it's a very interesting part of Jerome's history that the fact that you didn't know her name and you barely remember John McNerney's, and you don't really know the story of, and all the people who...
Well, I've talked to a couple people, Pat Montroy and other people who worked there, and told me a bit about it, but I forgot John's name.
Right.
Yeah.
Did Ed Dowling tell you much about it?
A little bit about that too, yes.
Well, those two, were very much involved in that. And Pat does the detailed...
Yes.
Soldering.
Now, you brought it up because of its economic significance?
Yes. It was just really helpful for the town of Jerome. I always hoped that we could get some other little businesses like that employed, 8, 10, 20, 30 people that sold outside of the town, brought money in from far afield.
Without the cars.
It's important to have that, to not be dependent on the tourism industry, which, like I say, I'm a little tired of. I understand the necessity and everything, but I regret that Jerome Instrument had to leave and nothing came along and replaced it after it did leave.
Well, we've got Western Heritage, but they're a small version of that.
Right. Well, they're doing pretty good. I don't know how many employees they have.
I think it's maybe 5 to 10.
Something in there. Yeah. And I appreciate that with them. I'm glad for that. I think they've done a good job. And they've expanded to that store up on Main Street, so that's good.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's kind of it. That was a very interesting, from my point of view, it was a very interesting happening time in Jerome's history, because you did get the sense that maybe it's not just a tourist town, but and it was an economic force here for the good in Jerome. A lot of people were then able to buy these old undervalued houses and invest their time and money into them and rescue them and build a life for themselves. And you turn around and 40 years have gone by all of a sudden.
Yeah, funny how that happens. So, so you're working for Richard?
I was.
Yeah, for
but like I say, it
couple
was just,
years?
it probably wasn't even, a couple. It was probably just one or something. And then my parents decided they wanted to buy a little plot of land up near Mendocino, the town of Mendocino. A little 10 acres for what I thought was a lot of money at the time. $3,000 an acre, holy shit.
Yeah, so
Or
you went up there
35.
for a year? And
For
then,
a year, and got the house to the point where my dad could stay healthy by working on it for the rest of his life. And he had to go down and, well, periodically, these trees that would fall over down there, and he'd cut them up and heat his house and the whole 9 yards. It was a great little. And I went up there about once a year, a little bit more than once a year for the next, I don't know, 20 or 30 years to do something, to help him do something or put a new roof on it, and et cetera, like that.
Right.
And it was cool. It was very cool. But then Barbara and I broke up around, I don't know, approximately 92 or something like that. And
So Barbara did agree to manage. Now, am I getting the names right? That
yes, she
Barbara
did.
did manage.
Yeah, he twisted her arm, and so
Okay.
they did. They built a little business. I mean, she was always the number two, although she said, make me the president, and they did for a year, but that was right before the whole thing got sold off to these other people.
Gotcha. So because of that relationship, you were intimately acquainted with the whole development of that business and
Yeah.
how it benefited the town.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was. That's all I can say over and over again. It was a very important part of the history of the town that is partly forgotten already, and people don't know what they do owe to, in the history of it. Like, Earl Bell. Do you know who Bobby
Bell's father?
Dad,
Okay.
yeah, was, I don't know, he helped develop some lasers or masers or something like that. And he was a very smart physicist, and so where was I going with that? He helped at Jerome Instrument for a period of time.
Okay.
They brought him on in the last couple of years, more or less to make it a better saleable product.
Yeah.
The product being the company and all of its technology, because I guess at one point in time, Bart says, what do you want out of this, John? And he also had two people that supported him and gave him a little bit of money to develop it in the beginning. That were the principals of the company. And she says, what do you want? And he says, I want $1 million. And he only wanted to put 5 years or something into it. And they almost hit their goals, but it was 7 years instead of just 5 or something like that, But that's finally what he did get out of it. And so did his investors. I can't remember their names right now, but they were his professors down in Phoenix, where he went to the university down there in geology. And he was a prospector, and he had all these great stories about prospecting in Australia, for instance, that was very cool. He was a very cool person, and he's no longer with us. There's a lot of people that are no longer with us, and that's what finally makes you old, I think. And so when I came back from California, I was trying to strike it up again with Barbara because, well, she was smart. And, anyway, and I had a new set of skills from building a whole house out there with my dad, and so we struck it up again, but at some point, and I'm confused about the exact timing of all of this, Diane and Walter Rappaport came out. And Diane was, I can find it online, but she was somehow connected with Bill Graham of the Fillmore East and West.
Yep.
And she wrote a book, How to Make and Sell Your Own Record.
As well, she wrote Home Recording for Musicians, which I bought in San Francisco in 1977.
In San Francisco.
And then when I came here and got my studio at where the town hall is now, she happened to have her office across the hall from my studio, and I introduced myself. So yeah, I was friends with Diane. And
well, they were living in the house with Barbara when I came back. And so Diane and Walter and Barbara and I were, good friends since forever. Although eventually I said, you guys should probably find some other place, in town. So they found the house down at the end of Verde Avenue.
Right.
And
that's where they were when I met them. Yeah.
Right. And, well, so we're all still totally fucking heartbroken that we had to let go of yet another.
Yep.
And Walter just called me yesterday, and it's been barely a month, I think. He's not doing real well, but Henry Vincent is going to try and call him and convince him to let him come by and help him get his affairs in order or whatever. I don't know. But,
cool.
But yeah, once...
please say hi for me if you talk to him again.
Once Diane and Walter and Barbara and I backpacked together through the Grand Canyon from the easternmost place where you can go down. Is that the Tanner Trailhead? And we came out in the middle one, the first middle one. So for I don't think it was 2 weeks, but it was close. And we played bridge every day. It was great.
Canyon Bridge.
It was fabulous. We had a really good time. Anyway, so yeah, we were really good friends. And
so you came back, tried to strike back up with Barbara, and when was this? What year?
It had to be somewhere around 79, 80. And these are all approximate. I might be able to nail it down a little bit more, but that's close enough. That really is kind of close enough. Max was only 2.
Okay.
And Michael, I don't know, but it doesn't matter. Michael and his sister. Anyway, so...
And you said you had a new set of skills.
Right, which I was able to, the first thing I did was just scrape the house and repaint the whole thing and get Michael Butcher to put gutters on everything. It's kind of what you need, is you got to have gutters on houses.
You kind of do. So this was a house where you and Barbara lived?
It was both of them, actually, and the garage. So anyway, we did that, and whatever. She's making enough money that we went camping all the time. I mean, once or twice a year, we'd go on these little 1 week, 2 week vacations camping, and we'd drive way the fuck out on these dirt roads through the national forest, because you can stay anywhere for up to 2 weeks, but you can just stay there for a night or two and go see something else and walk, and there are lots of good memories there.
Is Barbara still around?
No. She was, an early adopter of increased women's rights and respect and et cetera. And she once had to do a talk to some women's group down in Cottonwood, and she was trying to tell them, you got to get yourself independent from your husband, and and got to have your own savings account, and blah, 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 and don't be so dependent on him, because he's going to die before you, and you want to get it all in order. And they didn't really want to hear it, but anyway, and she had another button, Uppity Women Unite, which is a really cool button in my humble opinion. And then her and Diane did a little business services business in the at the gymnasium, where where Western Heritage is now, up those steps.
Yeah.
On the
where the offices are in the back.
Up in the back,
Yeah.
upstairs. And so they were in there for a couple of years doing their business services thing. And then, long story short, I was proud of Barbara when, she was never ultra healthy because she said her genetics or whatever. And she sat doing bookkeeping and business plan developing for most of her life, and I don't think it was real good for her circulation. So she eventually had such bad problems with the circulation in her legs that it did her in on the day of the vast women's protest, on the day after the inauguration of Donald Trump, and I was proud that she picked that day. If you're gonna go out, you go, girl. Anyway. And then, well, whatever, there's other people like Margaret Theed. You don't know Margaret Theed? Mm-mm. You know Wally, don't you?
Yeah. Margaret. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I remember. I just bumped into Wally, and he's gonna do an interview.
Ah, cool. Yes, he's a good one. He would be a very good one. He was approximately the same time, and you need everybody to fit all the differing points of view.
It's
together.
A quilt.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, well, Margaret was married to then John Cooney, and we were all having so much fun. She lives the way the hell out there.
I've been out there.
Out there. And she actually, just before she died, she was able to get, I guess it was something like $50,000 from the federal government for being one of the people who were downwind from the nuclear bomb
in Nevada.
In Nevada.
Now this is Barbara.
No, this is Margaret. This is Margaret.
Oh, Wally's Margaret has passed.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't know that.
My sister Nancy and her were walking at least one day a week. They'd drive all over the valley, and Margaret knew all the really cool Indian ruins, and because she grew up here, out there actually, and she went to school up here before the pipes froze that one winter, and they had to build a new school down there, and all the kids used to get bused up to Jerome until about 1971 or 2 or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's all interesting parts of the story. We love Margaret. John Cooney's now in Miami, but he was in St. Croix for a while. After Hurricane Hugo really fucked up St. Croix, my sister Dana had a business down there, and so I went down there and worked for many months, making pretty good money, many months. And whatever, there's just so many threads, you don't know which ones are particularly very important. Mostly just the ones in Jerome. So it was good times, when you all had to pitch together to volunteer to keep the town from decaying any more quickly. And
did you guys got together over beers and talked about this or encouraged each other on to that you needed to do something, or
I think it just happens organically. If you get the fire chief, not Rusty, I mean Dave.
Dave Hall?
Yeah, Dave Hall, or if ever you manage to. And Roger Davis is even more of a recluse than I am.
I interviewed Dave.
Dave Hall?
Yep.
Oh, well, then you should know most everything about them realizing that we had to upscale and get a little bit more professional, the fire department in this town.
A lot of people have talked about that, but like you said, it's a quilt, so everybody has a different
well, that was
window.
That might have been, that was partly, the beginning of the hippies starting to work with each other to improve because there really were only about 100 or 50 or something like that, old timers who hung around here. And there's stories about, when the mine said it was closing down, if you want, you can go down to southern Arizona and work at that mine down there.
Right.
People walked out and they left all the dishes and they left the shoes in the closet. They just walked out and they left it because they didn't want to pack it all up. They just, we'll buy more down there, and so people were scavenging this town for a long time, and there's a lot of interesting characters when I got here. John Figge was my supervisor. He was just this weird, crazy character.
Yeah.
You've heard of him?
Scott Owens, and
Right.
even Jane told me quite a bit about.
Right. Well, then there was Shorty Powell. There's a really cool story about him. He was the hunchback. I don't know. He was just very, very short. Whatever that is, 4 feet or something.
4 feet, yeah.
Or 4'3" or something like that. And he did have a hunchback, and he lived. Well, I'm not even positive exactly where, but the story I like about him is that he was a cat raiser and breeder or whatever, and he was kind of brutal about it. In the beginning, he just took all the little runts and snapped their necks, so nothing but the big ones. And they got to be such big fucking cats that I guess they attacked some tourists one day. One of them or something like that, chase these tourists away. So he changed his plan and he started breeding for little tiny, And so they were really tiny and incredibly cute little cats, the ones that I saw before he died.
Safety cats.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Now, he was left over from the mine, this fellow?
No. These were all the early, some people stayed after the mine closed. And then the early before the hippies, but they might have been kind of inspired by the beat generation or whatever. Yeah. They were the original art community or the eccentric whatever community. And they were here a little bit before the hippies started showing up. And I would have to say, I think I was kind of at the end of the first wave of the hippies. And then people have kept coming ever since. And some people find it to their liking. And a lot of people just move on. And that's fine too, It's interesting. It's an interesting town. It's a microcosm of, it reflects everything that's out there. You see the small version of it here, I think, as far as politics and all the foibles of people. You see them here and you see it reflected out there at different levels of state and federal government and international government and all, and so in the beginning it was quiet at night, It was a nice place to live and there was a nice hippie community and, potlucks and the whole 9 yards, blah, blah. And I don't know what to say. It was cool.
You were not as much of a recluse back then as you admitted to becoming here in the last 5-10 years, maybe?
Yeah, something like that.
Well,
I don't know how to put it precisely, but it's hard to say. It's that fine line between you want to hold on to what you really liked about the town when you first moved here and when you have to make compromises after compromises after compromises. And some people, they come here going, oh, look, a cool tourist town. Let's make some money. And their only motivation is money, and they have no attachment to the community whatsoever. And that gets a little disappointing after a while.
Yeah, and corrosive. There's a lot of people that drive up from the valley every day to open up their business up here.
but their allegiance is down there, and and so we have to make, they come and fight with the early design review and planning and zoning for the right to build whatever house or business or whatever, and it gets chipped away, the whatever, I don't know the exact word, but the lofty vision of the original people who were trying to develop a structure to control and maintain the growth of Jerome, into a tolerable tourist supported community.
Right.
Because you look over at Sedona and it's kind of the worst example of what can happen, and slowly Jerome gets eroded into that, even though we kind of have a little bit more to sell in old buildings and history, the history of the mining company.
That's an interesting topic to me. I think others might be interested too. What you were involved in planning and zoning and those sorts of government things, and you talked about the development of the town plan, the comprehensive
Right.
plan. So, can you describe to me the inspiration at the time, and you guys describe how you're looking forward, what you wanted to avoid, what you wanted to ensure? Can you give me any character of the conversations that were being had about how to design the comprehensive plan and why?
I forget exactly. Richard Martin is somebody that you should consider.
I had 3 days with him.
Right. Well, he has a little bit more firsthand knowledge of the beginnings of that. He was much more intimately involved in the
creation.
In the creation.
Well,
of
you
it.
were part of the implementation.
Yes.
So you must have had some touchstone to what it was you were.
Well, we had to develop the comprehensive plan. I think it had to do with the fact that we were a National Historic Landmark, and essentially to get various grants, like an important story that we got to make sure we don't lose that one either, is that the town water line broke at a certain point back in the very early days, like the late 70s, I think. And we were in dire straits at the time, and we had to get emergency funding from the federal government, who said, okay, we'll help you rebuild the 13 miles of line. I'm sure I'm over-exaggerating and under-exaggerating certain aspects of it, but part of the deal with that was that the town was supposedly required to put in water meters and read them, and then eventually start charging by usage, which we never have. We put the water meters in and we read them all the time, but it's a flat rate, which is basically like they figured out, and the town finally figured out that the only way we can easily make this work is it's much easier to just say one person pays $77, and it wasn't always $77 and however many, and two of you, that's 117 as I recall, or whatever, and I hate bills, but that's, the understanding that you got to pay the bills to maintain the infrastructure. Anyway, that was a frightening time, and we got the money. And I think during that process, it all became apparent that, to continue to get varying grants to upgrade various buildings and all, the town had to turn itself into a genuine entity. We always were. And we're in the state of Arizona, we're the only variety of town that's out there. We're the smallest, and we're not a city. We are actually a town of Jerome, which puts it into a slightly different category, of which I believe we're the only, there might be another one, example. So anyway, so we all realized, well, we have to become a legitimate entity, and that entailed. And they did a good job. The Jerome Fire Department, Dave Hall's story is he's the one who got the entire connected fire departments of the valley into one unit, and the noon whistle that goes off at noon and at 6 o'clock on Thursday they do that from a central location down there now to make sure that everybody's system works, so that if somebody calls 911 and they get to them, there's a fire over here or whatever, it'll go to them and they can trigger the alarm, the fire alarm in Jerome from down there. Anyway, so that's why they test it every day, is to make sure it's still working. And at 6 o'clock on Thursday.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Or thereabouts.
It's pretty precise, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, although they change it a little bit, you know.
The noon one is a little here or there, it seems like to me.
Oh, well, it's at, according to my clocks, it's at 14 minutes till noon every day.
Okay.
And I go about my business and I look at the clock an hour or two later and it's still not noon. You know, I go, oh yeah, it did. You know, like 12 minutes ago. All sorts of shit can happen in 10 or 15 minutes. Anyway, you know, and so that was the beginning of the understanding. And they actually had to go in there and kind of wrestle control from the guys who were manning the fire department at the time and turn it into a little bit more, you know, the younger people were willing to step up.
Yeah.
And the old timers were a little, you know, like, this is our, you know, bailiwick, this is our territory. And the same thing had to happen with the town government too, at a certain point. And I forget what happened. But we had to get Jamie Moffett installed on the town council. And so we went all around town and we got all these signatures, like 230 signatures. And we walked in during a meeting and we said, we demand that you put Jamie Moffett on the town council. And they couldn't really do anything. They were going to appoint somebody, one of their, you know, the non-hippie community. And they said, well, 230 signatures, that's basically every person who can.
That it wasn't an election at that time?
No, it wasn't an election. For some reason, I don't want to remember that because I'd probably get it wrong. But anyway, somebody left in the middle of their term and we needed to appoint somebody to...
And why Jamie Moffett?
Just because he was willing to. I guess, kind of, at the time.
And he was one of your guys, or at least he had the perspective.
He's a hippie.
Yeah.
He's a lunatic just like the rest of us.
Yeah. I know Jamie.
And we all are, you know. Given enough time, we'd all go, you know, we'd notice each other's flaws and, you know, drift to some other best friend, you know, for a while, and then away from that. And, you know, that's just the nature of small town life in a sense, you know. But
so what were you guys, like I said, I wanted to see if you know about, you know, what were your concerns in terms of how you structured the planning and zoning, and how did you wanted to defend against what, and how did you go about it?
well, it's...
You wanted it to be a somewhat successful tourist town, but you didn't want to suffer.
Right. So we tried to figure out how to implement a way to constrain explosive growth, which I guess we could all kind of see off in the future that if it becomes too successful too quickly, then the quality of life would degrade. I think we could see that somehow. It was just obvious, apparent. And I don't know if it was talked about or anything. But design review was the vehicle through which we could slow down the the growth and keep it from being too gaudy. And it was through the understanding that, yes, this was a major argument for a long time, that we are a National Historic Landmark, so the houses have to fit into a certain look, and we knew new houses were going to be built here. Barbara Blackburn had a friend of hers from San Francisco come out here, and he says, Barbara, someday this whole hillside is going to be awash with $1 million houses, and it has not happened yet in the way that I think he was trying to convey to her. But so that was kind of the wake-up call that. Plus, we had somewhat limited water, and so you are justified in realizing that you only have this much water coming in, and only so much of it can be dedicated to providing water for everybody. Plus, we had to make sure that the fire department had enough water whenever, and there was a big fire down there.
Yeah, Jane told me about that one.
Yeah.
When that was the wake up call that they opened up the hydrant and no water came out.
That could be.
The one, I think it was out near Patty Bell's, or on the Bell property out there.
Oh.
Some house she was telling me about.
Right. What's his name? Hofstetter.
Yeah, the woman jumped out of the window, broke her leg. He did.
And broke his ankles. Yeah. There was that, but then there was another one down here. And that's when we realized we had to, some people were saying, we need new water tanks. And they wanted to abandon those ones that we have up there. And we hired some people to come out, and they got inside and they said, there is nothing wrong with these, that a little bit of repair and maintenance, and so we've got enough up there, but a really bad fire, we'd drain those things.
Yeah.
We would drain those things. And so the fire department was responsible for upgrading our rating, which then reduces your insurance rates in this town. And they were responsible for that. Jerome was able to raise its fire rating because they got professional and they started training, and they went around and, figured out all the hydrants that did still work and the ones that should be, they're all color-coded painted now, which ones they can. And, Rusty and the rest of the crew know which ones, and we had to get some operational to be able to cover every point in town if we ever had a bad fire. And we haven't had that many, I mean, it is kind of like 3. To my memory, it might be 1 or 2 or 3 more than that, but just 3.
We just had a recent one 2 houses down
that's
from
right.
me.
4.
Yeah, and the guys did a stellar job.
Yes, they did. That was an interesting one because she heard a pop down to some overloaded
electrical thing. Yeah, I
well,
know
I think
the whole
it's
story.
Computer power supply thing. Possibly too many things plugged into it, and possibly defective and whatever.
Yeah, well, that was quite the experience for us here on East Avenue. Real quickly, I mean, we were all scared, of course, that it might spread. But then the other wonderful thing is that the guys did a fantastic, quick, fast response. And then, we all got involved by bringing water and food and snacks down to the, so it becomes a community thing. But let's get back to, so you guys implemented sign controls, parking things in order to stem the...
Now, my understanding is it's Virginia City, Nevada. Is that what it is? I'd have to look on a map because I drove through there once. But anyway, if you buy a piece of property in that town, they actually tell you what color you can paint your walls on the inside, not just the outside. So we're not as bad as you can get in some, historical communities that are like these weird-ass gated communities. And they're not gated, but you understand my... So we understood that any new houses that get built can't stand out like a sore thumb and go, this is obviously
Not historic.
not historic, and it jars with the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And that's
And once you get one, you get two, then you get three, and next thing
well,
you know,
and
you don't have your ambience anymore.
Right, right. And, you know, so that's kind of what we've been having to struggle against. You get chipped away at, chipped away at, chipped away at. You know, and some of them it's like, it used to be you had to have wooden double hung windows. Those aluminum things were not allowed. But at a certain point you go, the technology and blah, blah, blah. It's a little hard to tell somebody, oh, you got to use this old tech that doesn't really work all that well.
It's
And
energy
I've
inefficient.
repaired them.
Yeah.
And I know how to do it. And it's an unpleasant, and they still don't work all that well. They would if they were double hung or whatever, you know. And so you understand that there are some compromises, some battles that you shouldn't put too much into.
Did you, how was your experience with the old timers who were here in the...
Well, here's a story. See, I'm not real proud of this one either. I almost hate to, okay, I'll edit it slightly. I was the guy for the Historical Society, and I swept out the My Museum on the corner up there, you know, mopped the floors, and then I did all this other cleanup work, you know. And then minimum wage got raised from $3.18 to $3.50, man. Anyway, so it was Mickey Peterson. What's his name? Peterson. You know where she lived? On 3rd Street, 4th Street.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
That funny little thing, you know, that goes around the 3rd and
Andy's
4th.
dad.
Andy, right, his dad, right. But her, anyway, she was the main, Mickey was the one that worked 5 days a week. And then this other lady, who I shall allow to remain nameless, was kind of a, you know, she was just a cranky old person. And Mickey and I got along just fine, you know, and Jane Troyer and I got along just fine. She was the volunteer person downstairs where the Mine Cafe is now, is where I used to work down in there, and off onto the whole other side. That was all Historical Society. And they used to sell books. They came to Jerome out of there. And I would get the orders, and I would package them up, and I'd post them, and I'd, you know, put them in the mail. And that was part of my duties, you know. I was kind of a jack of all trades for them for a couple of years. But anyway, so this lady was the 2-day-a-week person. And so I was up there sweeping, mopping the floors or something. You know, do they charge more than $0.25 yet to go through that thing? I don't know, but that's what it was for the longest time. You know, you'd walk through and it's kind of cool, all that old mining equipment, some pictures and everything. It's okay. So she's there, and somebody brings in their teenage niece who's visiting from out of state. And she says, "Oh, I'm glad you brought her in so we'd know who not to shoot at." You know, it's kind of, I'm within earshot, and I'm pretty sure she knows that I'm probably within earshot. So it's something of a, you know, an insult. You know, so it's kind of like, okay, these cranky old people. They did a good thing by visiting their family back east and putting the brochures in every rest stop between there and back again. And they started promoting the town way back when. And
yeah, Jerry Voynick and Ellen told me a bit about that.
Yeah.
Where they had to figure out what the hell they were going to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they did a good job of saving it until some dirty fucking hippies would come along. And they would also pitch in, you know, and so some of them did not take kindly to the invasive, you know, whatever. But then others, you just realize, oh, these are fine people, you know.
Well, it seems the aggregate story is that once they saw that the newcomers, quote unquote, had a stake in the town, were willing to chip in and
Right.
help it improve
Right.
themselves, then that sort of
Yeah.
greased the wheels of friendship.
Yeah, yeah, you know, and Jerry Voynich just loved Barbara Blackburn. You know,
Yeah.
Barbara loved him. You know, they had a great time. I really liked him too. He was a little intimidating, but
He was a big guy.
yeah, but basically he was a good person.
Yes, definitely.
You know, and so it was interesting. The people who got here before, the people that never left, and then, you know, the generation of hippies that started coming, I guess, in the late 60s. If you ever talk to Terry Malloy, he can tell you a bunch more stories, especially about the Gulch. And there's a strange whole other
World.
yeah, that, well, whatever, you know.
Well, is there anything I haven't touched on that you thought about wanting to mention?
There's so much, I don't know. I get distracted by all of it. Oh, well.
Well, consider we're talking to people in the future and important history that they would find valuable.
Out of that time, it's hard to say. Everybody just kind of hung on for dear life, and some, for whatever reasons, succeeded, and others, for whatever reasons, moved on. You know, and there's a whole spectrum of reasons why you would stay and why you would move on. You know, but one of the stories. Have you been to the state park over there? Have you seen the display that they have over there?
Yeah.
You paid your $5
yeah.
a couple of times, because you should look very closely at everything, which requires you
You're
pay.
talking about the plexiglass box with the model in it?
Yeah, the one, there's 2 or 3, you know, and one of them shows you that there's a really big hole down under down there.
Tell me.
There's a monster big hole that they took all of the iron ore out of. And then they took it over some distance and poured it down this huge shaft, where they then shoveled it over to those little electric mine cars that they built the Child's power plant over there to provide electricity for them to take the electric ore carts out and eventually get it down to smelt it
In Clark?
in Clarkdale. They moved the smelter from up here,
Yeah.
so they could get at everything that was immediately below there. But there's this huge thing. I mean, I have to go over and pay another $5 so that I can accurately describe how big the void is down there. It's a monster, big, nothing space down there. And it's a great story.
Oh,
but
it's actually at the museum on that property?
what, the hole?
Yeah.
No, the hole is way down, way fucking down, under the earth.
Oh. Okay.
Way
so there's
down under the
photos
earth.
of it at the museum.
No, there's just a representation of this hollowness under the model of the town. There's 2 models, and then I think there's some diagrams,
Okay.
and I don't remember.
They took iron out?
No,
not copper?
they took all the ore out,
Oh, okay.
and
And they needed this hole for what reason?
they needed the copper that was there. The hole is what was left behind after they got rid of all the copper.
Okay.
But then the story I like to tell the tourists is that they smelted it and turned it into copper wire and sold it all over the world, but ultimately the copper wire connected Jerome and the whole rest of the world together, originally just through telephone lines and electric light lines, and that whole history is an interesting history. But in the process, we all got on the phone, talked to each other, and we drove back and forth across the country pursuing, careers or whatever. And the end result of the whole process of talking to each other on the phone is that we realized we needed to construct an internet. And so the whole story goes full circle, and it's a great story about how the copper has wired the world together. And my internet comes through DSL from CenturyLink. I don't do the wireless radio or anything like that because they gave me a great deal back in the early whatever. And so I listened to internet radio 24 hours a day. I just turn it down until I can't hear it at night because there's a problem with my current setup now, and the only way to keep it from falling asleep and not waking up is just to leave it. Anyway, but that story of we mine the copper so that we can make light bulbs and, even more importantly, telephones. And we got on the phone and we talked to each other. And after we talked to each other, we realized we got to do even better than just telephones talking to each other.
Right. But the ore came from Jerome, and it
a lot of it did.
Literally connected a lot of the world together.
Yes,
yeah.
It did. I mean, a lot of it went everywhere else, but that it did flow from out of here also simultaneously.
Yeah.
And that's the perspective I like to tell people. I tell them that quick, short version of it, and they say, you got to go down and pay. It's the best $5 you will spend almost in your entire life. They've got a great display down there. It's a great little museum.
Yep.
And there's a little film. I don't know if they still show it,
Yeah, they do.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you look real closely, somehow I got my picture stuck at the end of the film in, all of the early hippies when they did the first picture on the steps across from Paul and Jerry's. There's a picture at the end of that film that briefly, but thank you. At the end of the film, I guess they say something about, the hippies came and helped. In my humble opinion, it is helped to save the town. The people that never left, which is, the ones that didn't want to go down there, it was too late, they were too old to go down there, and they formed the Historical Society, and that's a whole story all by itself. I'm a little disappointed in the current configuration of the Historical Society, but I don't know enough. I mean, I was a member for a long time, but eventually my interests were drawn in other directions,
Well, Greg, we've gone an hour and a quarter.
Right.
I want to make sure that I get everything that you felt was important. I mean, I don't know about you. Are you winding down?
Everybody, well, if you want to go for a little bit longer, I probably could until the hands start shaking. I got to go home and get a beer or something like that. And one of my cats is not doing well, and that just bothers the shit out of me when they're not well. So I don't know, this is just my limited point of view, and somehow it's an interesting story, and there was a lot of, and eventually even all the people who were the wave of hippies that started in the early 70s, and that would be Ed Delling and Terry Malloy and a few others. I think Jane Moore got here a few years before me. Eventually we realized, well, we don't even like all of each other either, even though, it's us against the old timers, and now we're the old timers. And some of the young timers, they don't quite understand that, one of them said to me, oh, you guys don't give us the culture or whatever. And it made me think, well, what kind of culture are we supposed to tell you all about, And I guess it's, we heard about, I don't know.
The stories of where they
Well,
live.
part of the stories and the potlucks and et cetera, the old... but at a certain point, we do kind of drift into slightly, because you get older and you can't keep up all your social obligations, and you do find that you've got differences of opinion about local politics and whatever,
Yeah. Are you optimistic about Jerome's future?
It's possible that something major could really fuck up. in our water or sewer line that would be devastating. And there's, I believe, more copper ore still left under over there off towards North Mingus that someday will probably be mined. And they would just leave this behind and start a whole new town up there. But then the amount of traffic, and I mean big machine traffic and booms and thunders and all of that. You know, there was a story at one point in time that somebody did a study and said, well, the most cost-effective way to gain access to that is a couple of well-placed nuclear charges that would blow off the overburden, is what they called it. They would just go lift it up and move that, and then you'd have more access to the...
Right. Have a new open pit.
Right. And you know where all this copper came from is one of those big black smokers that used to be down under the water. And slowly over time, it gets moved inland 600-800 miles and a mile above sea level. But it used to be way below sea level, and that's what concentrates the copper ore. Anyway, so yeah, I have concerns about the future of Jerome, you know, and it's also kind of like, you know, the new people, they got to invent their own version of Jerome without knowing anything about.
Yeah. Do you feel like there's a continuity between the newcomers?
Well, they're always
the types of people that come.
It depends. Some yes and some no. I mean, there's a lot of these new people. They go, oh, what a cool. You know, it's like that old TV ad from way back when of whatever. Oh, what a cool place. Let's develop it. You know, and so part of the resistance is just that we don't want to turn into Sedona, because many parts of Sedona have just gotten fucked up.
Yeah.
And I worked over there for many, many years because that's where the money is.
Yeah, the landscape is beautiful and the architecture is pathetic.
Yeah, something like that.
Except for the hauses off the road that no one can see.
Right, right. And I worked on a lot of those.
Me too.
Some of them are monster expensive, gaudy. We worked on this house over there once that I made a ton of money. It saved my fucking life. But anyway, we were back over there a year later because the guy had sold it, and the new person came in and gutted almost everything that we'd done. You know,
I've been
and
there.
it's like, fuck, this is weird.
Well, yeah.
Rich people.
It's a different world.
Rich people. There ought to be a law against doing some of that kind of
it's
shit.
just a matter of scale. But, well, I got one last question for you. It's one that I ask everybody. If you could put a message in a bottle to Jeromans 50 years from now, what would you say to him?
I don't know. I'd have to think about that. Because like I say, you know, I fear for the development of a new mine up there will very radically degrade the quality of life. Although, well, perhaps not. They might put in a brand new road. You know that they fixed that road that used to be the old railroad track down to Clarkdale.
Oh, they did that when
company.
when they did the reclamation, the water reclamation.
Right,
yeah.
but they redid the road so that
Yeah.
it was big enough to handle very large ore trucks. And I've heard that there's a lot of, I believe it's tin. It's either tin or that other one, zinc. There's a lot of tin or zinc over there somewhere.
Yeah, well, the rumors go every couple of years that something might start up again.
Right.
Yeah. Well,
And more copper's over there way down under. But
well, I'd like
anyway.
to, let's send a message to them, something in addition to the concerns about the mine opening up again, just about the community and themselves as Jeromans and descendants, as it were, figuratively.
Right.
Of
some
you
of
guys,
some of these 40-year-olds were only,
yeah,
you know, 2 when I
Yeah.
first met them,
yeah.
and whatever. Well, it's it's still relatively quiet at night if you don't live too exposed to the downtown scene, and if you're a little away from, the highway that occasionally gets too loud, and there's more and more emergency vehicles coming up through town. I had a tenant recently who moved. He was in Prescott for basically his whole life, and he wanted to move out there because he could hear all of downtown Prescott. And it was like nothing but nonstop police sirens and fire truck sirens and,
right.
Emergency vehicle sirens. And, he was a little depressed by the growing up of Arizona. When I first got here, there were less than 2 million people in the state of Arizona. And now there's 6 million plus. And, well, whatever, there's 3,000 people a day moving to Phoenix? A net increase of 3,000 people a day. These are monstrous numbers, They're all frightening numbers, is all, you know. And I just kind of hope that Jerome can hold on to a reasonable quality of life. It's very picturesque. You've got this incredible view that, you can just let go and look out your window and let many of your cares just dissipate into, the view out there. And if it remains quiet enough, that...
So that's your message, try to keep it quiet.
Well, no, hold on to whatever it takes, if you have to somehow discourage, the tourist industry getting out of control, and taking over the quality of your life, then it's not going to be worth living in Jerome anymore. I have made very little money off of this town and the tourist industry in this town. And that's possible to do,
and survive.
by going over to
right
every day for an hour each direction,
Yeah, I do it.
Yeah, well, and so I think it's worth remembering that it's kind of fragile in a sense. I mean, it seems strong right now, but it's still kind of fragile, and I would hate to see Jerome not worth living in someday for whatever reason. Because it's a cool place. I've invested a fucking life here,
Yeah.
Oh, that's being recorded, isn't it?
You can say fuck. I've said fuck a couple times.
Well, there's a story about Barbara. They used to meet with potential investors and people who wanted to buy instruments from them, McNerney and her, and et cetera. And some of them would pull him aside, or one of them did once, and say, "Why does she say fuck all the time?" And he said, "To get your attention." And there's another story from a teacher that I once had, and I'll tell you that one some other time up at the bar. Okay. It's a funny story. It's just about how, fuck shouldn't be a word that makes people have small heart attacks. It's like, it's just a sound, for God's sake. There's a town in Germany that its name is fuck. It's literally, And they when they found out about it, they said, "Should we change our name?" And they go, "Nah, it's okay."
They said, "Fuck you."
They basically, "Nah, fuck is good. We're good with our town name of fuck."
Well, Greg, I want to thank you very much.
Okay, Michael.
For your sharing your time with me and future Jeromans. Yeah. So goodbye and thanks again.
Yep.
All right, buddy.
Yep.